All right, so we are going to take a look at type. I've made a new standard Photoshop size document, and I'm going to be walking through the handout info that we have on the website, so feel free to follow along with that. Hopefully I will not screw it up too much. So here we have our exciting blank Photoshop document. And I've got a couple of new palettes out over here. I've got character and paragraph. Um, Now, if you don't have those floating around, you can always go to Window and get character there, paragraph down there. They are also usually docked over here, for me at least, in my standard workspace. But I just pulled them out so they are a little bit easier to see. Let's take a look at what the controls are in each of these. If we want to do any text in Photoshop, first thing we need to do, obviously, is get the type tool. So to do that, it's T, predictably, on the keyboard. Pops up down there. It is a T, presumably for type or text or tool, I don't know. And if we draw a box with it, has these four handles, starts out with a little blinking cursor, and if I begin typing, I'll start getting text. That text is using my foreground color for the text color, in this case a delightful fuchsia left over from the last clip. You get also your nice contextual menu up across the top, the same way that you do with any tool. And up there I can thankfully choose a different text color. Whew, that was close. Again, this is vector-based, so when I do that, it changes it. I'm not having to select it and adjustment layers or whatever. Up across the top, we have some other options, some of which we'll use, some of which we won't. We can toggle orientation. This is not like rotating type so that it writes like that. This is rotating type so that it's like CAT, right? So if I change it, right, I haven't rotated that block of text. It's just that it is now going up and down. Why would you do this? Well, there are probably some graphic design reasons. More often, I assume, it's because you're writing in a language that actually goes up and down instead of side to side. Here is my little thing here that's telling me what my font is. As I've said the word font, if there are any graphic designers out there, they're like, rah, 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 rah. So I guess technically it's a face. Everyone calls it a font. Get over it. Or don't, but don't at me about it. I mean, it's not my fault. So that's our contextual menu. There's a whole bunch of different fonts. They will vary depending on what's on your computer. You can add fonts from Typekit if you're interested in getting more interesting fonts through Creative Suite. I'm not going to go into that. You are welcome to do it. I would totally recommend it. There's some cool fonts out there. I'm going to, let's see, maybe we'll, oh, Bane of Existence, Comic Sans. I cannot bring myself to do that. Times New Roman, nice and simple. So that's Times New Roman, that's the name of my font. Next to it, there are some options here: regular, italic, bold, bold italic. You have probably used a computer before and you've probably played around with some of these. You can see sort of what they do if I zoom in a little bit. One of the things that you will run into, which I just did, is that I held down the space bar trying to get the hand of grabbing and sliding things around, and I just deleted my text. If you are frequently using keyboard shortcuts, you will find yourself doing the same thing. So be aware. All right. So regular, italic, bold, bold italic. What options you have here will depend entirely on what font you're using. If I went to another font, I just have regular. If I went to a third font, it would be a good one. Yeah, some of the fonts you'll have more options, some of the fonts you'll have fewer options. That's because these are not as simple as just making a font slanted. They are actually designed by typographers to do different things, right? So this is not, italics is not just everything is angled a little bit. You can see there's sort of curves. The Y is very, very different. All of the fonts in these letters change completely. Or excuse me, shapes of the letters change completely in an italic font face, or bold, bold italic, and back to regular. Things that are over here, size, you can actually click and drag left and right. Font size is measured in points. How big physically a point actually is on your document will kind of depend on the resolution of your file. I would say just eyeball it. And let's see, what else do we have here? Alignment. But to get into all of these things a little bit more, let's go over, sorry, I looked at the handout, to the actual character palette, right? So we have all of these things up here in this contextual menu, but let's go ahead over here into character and paragraph. I'm going to set 2 lines of text. So in 2 different fonts. Okay. Things to be aware of in what I just did. So I copied and pasted within the same thing. When I first made that new text block, it popped up a new layer. Anytime you click and start entering a new piece of text, it will make its own layer, the same way that a shape layer did when we were making shapes. So there's that. Here's this one. These are 2 different fonts. Obviously, they're also 2 different types of font. No pun even anticipated. The first one, this is a serif font. If you go look at those links on the website, you'll sort of get some more information on it. This is a sans serif font, or sans serif font. The differences between them is that a serif font has these little tails on everything, and a sans serif font is much more straight up and down and across, right? The K here in Rockstar is just a vertical. In the serif font, the K has a little sort of taily thing at the top and the bottom. Why are those there? I don't know. I always say that they're a leftover thing from sort of Roman alphabets where you're having to chisel these things in with a rock, or into the rock with a hammer, and you need a place to sort of like come in with your chisel. You could say they're leftover from writing calligraphy shit. I don't know. Ask somebody who knows what the fuck they're talking about, not me. So there we go. We've got our 2 fonts there. Let's make them a little closer together. So character palette, right? So this is the same stuff we had in that contextual menu. We can choose a font. We can choose a, what am I saying? Bold, italic kind of thing. We choose the size. Again, we can drag back and forth, or we can simply go in there and select a number. If you don't have anything selected, changing those things will not affect what you're seeing in front of you. If you do have text selected, then it will. Going over here, we start to get into some stuff that we did not have before. Excuse me. So this little thing right here, if you come in on it, if I mouse over it, it says set the, and then there's a word. That word is leading, as in lead in a bullet, not leading. It is leading. It is coming from when you set type mechanically, and it was made out of these little tiny bits of metal that was lead because it was soft and easy to cast at a lower temperature. You would space your things out by putting a bar of blank, essentially lead, between them. So that's why it's called leading. Most of the time we want it on auto. You can go in and change it. Make it a little bit smaller if you want, make it a little bit bigger if you want. What we want to avoid is things running into each other. So right now that Y and the E are colliding, the apostrophe and the W are colliding, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to go back to auto. Here we have two other controls. So if I mouse over this, it says kerning. If I mouse over this, it says tracking. Kerning is the distance between various sorts of letters, right? We have two options. We have metrics and we have optical. Probably optical is a better idea. The way to think about kerning, letters do not all take up the same amount of space. So if I were to come in here and make a uppercase V and a lowercase a, you can see that the relationship between these letters is different, right? If I come over here and pull a guide out of the side here, this V actually comes into the space of the A, right? This O, almost barely. This H, not really very much at all. So the different letter forms will sort of nest, snuggle in there a little bit differently depending on what their shape is. So that is how, or that shifting things around or whatever is kerning. Metrics versus optical, I don't really know, to be totally honest. Maybe it's in the handout. Maybe you can Google it online. I think that optical is based on what it looks like, and metrics is setting down some just like hard and fast rules. No idea. Optical, good enough. Again, you have to have text selected to do anything. Cool. This is, if this was, sorry, mouse over it again, this is kerning, and over here we have tracking. Tracking is overall how much space we're putting between the letters. So if a V and an A have a particular relationship where they sort of like nestle in like this, tracking them will determine how close those letters are, right? Even if they're always going to be at their minimum, slightly different from an H and an N, for example. So if I come in here and change my tracking, right, you can see that all the letters get much more spread out, and that looks ridiculous. So I'm going to undo that. So kerning, tracking, this is basically just stretching things vertically. I guess there's probably a name for that. Mouse over it. Oh, vertical scale. And same thing, how skinny or how sort of stretched out they are. None of these things are changing it from being vector-based text, right? So in all of these, if I come in here and start typing, it is going to still allow me to change the words, even if I have taken all of those letters and made them very skinny and right up on top of each other, which is a terrible idea. And I will go back, escape out of that. All right, so those are our basic controls for text. So let me put another little text box in here. Other things that are in here, color, right? We can edit that anywhere. Baseline shift, don't worry about that. Don't mess with it. Underneath this are a couple of things, faux bold, faux italic, differences between faux and non-faux. So when I was talking about italic just like literally being different and designed to look differently, here we have real italic on the top and faux italic on the bottom. Faux italic really is just angled over a little bit, whereas the real italic is an actually designed by a typographer kind of thing. So those are all of our big pieces of text in the character palette. Paragraph palette primarily controls alignment and justification. So to get something relevant with that, let's go ahead and put in more text. I don't know the rest of the lyrics, so I'm just going to repeat that. Okay, there we go. There's some text. Let's make it a little bit smaller so we can see more of it. All right. So here we have a paragraph of text. And now if I go to the paragraph palette, I don't have to select this block. I can just be in that paragraph and it will affect it. These should be pretty self-explanatory. There is a line left, right, where the text goes to the left side. There is a line center where the text, instead of being shoved up against one side, is aligned in the middle, and so the edges are sort of raggedy going down. A line right, where it is shoved up against the right side, and the edge is raggedy on the opposite side. And then there is justified text. Justified text is up against both sides. But the way that it does that is that it spaces out the words. So this is going to look a little cleaner as a shape, but is going to mean that the spacing between the words is uneven. Left or right justified is going to have one jaggedy, left or right aligned is going to have one jaggedy edge, or two jaggedy edges if it's center aligned. But the spacing between the words is going to stay the same, and therefore it's going to maybe be a little bit easier to read. So big, strong shape, then you can justify it. Otherwise, probably not a great idea. Looking at these options, right, there's three different versions of justification. These three here, the only difference is the last line. So this last line is shorter than everything else. And so it would be sort of silly if we went over here to completely justify it and not worry about that and bit, because that means that major is on that side and general is on that side, so that you have everything lining up perfectly. More often, I don't know when the hell you would do this, more often you are going to have that last little bit either be on your left or on your right. So those are our character controls. You can also control the indent a little bit. You can control how much the first line of a paragraph is indented, if that's something you're into. You can control how much space there is above a paragraph when you have several paragraphs, or how much space you have below a paragraph, again, if you have several paragraphs. Okay, so those are the character and paragraph palettes. Again, look at the magical handout that is on here. And I'm going to go into looking a little bit more closely at some text.